This is The Sound of Freedom, October 25th, 2012. I'm your host, Ryan Brooks. Folks, if you really want the inside story on what's really going on in the world, make sure you take a trip down the rabbit hole with Popeye. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 10 to midnight, and especially on Sundays from 5 to 7. All those are Eastern time. The most compelling 2 hours in radio, guaranteed to show you a side of the Matrix that you never knew existed. Down the rabbit hole with Popeye on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Incredible website, federaljack.com. Make sure you guys drop by the Sound of Freedom 1776.wordpress.com. I'm turning that into just a library of information, so check those out when you get the chance. We have our guest today, Mr. Matthew Hayward, the county coordinator for the Thurston County Campaign for Liberty, president of the Conservative Alternative Movement out here, and so much more. I mean, just such a huge voice in the Liberty movement. The guy's relentless, full spectrum dominance. We're talking about giving up, quitting, things of that nature. Matthew, the ball's in your court.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I wear many hats. I just want to make it clear that I'm not speaking on behalf of Campaign for Liberty or any of those hats. I'm just speaking on behalf of myself today. So, and I wanted to finish up with anarcho-capitalists. This is, again, one of the motivating topics that I really wanted to talk about because it was very frustrating to me when I went to New York to Liberty Fest, and there were 700 people or so there, and I would say somewhere around half or so didn't vote and didn't believe in being involved in the political process, though essentially philosophically believed in the same things as I did. And it was incredibly frustrating to be putting so much work and so much time into going out and educating people how to get involved and how to have an effect and how to make a difference when there were so many like-minded people who refused to even show up. And it really hurts me, and I get frustrated with folks that are educated, know what's going on, and sit at home. And it makes me wonder, why do you bother educating yourself if you're not going to do anything about it? You're really not any better than the guy who's completely deluded, sitting on his couch watching propaganda. If you're not going to get involved and do something about it, it's just not relevant. There's no point. So now I watched this video with Larkin Rose, and he brought up a question: is there a legitimate government? And he talked about the ruling class and the myth of authority. Now, is there an organized effort to manipulate and enslave and exploit us? Maybe, but there's a famous quote that's, just because you do not take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you. So you can opt out and not give consent all you want, but this is reality. And these people need to step out of utopia and stop intellectually masturbating and join me in reality for a minute. If you try and opt out of the social contract that has been constructed with or without your consent, you will face the myth of authority. And it will appear very real as you're getting pepper sprayed, tased, and drug off to your cell. This is not a myth. This is a reality. And I idealistically agree with anarcho-capitalists, and I want the same things as they want. However, I don't believe that there's some magical utopian way of, well, we're just going to all opt out. Well, obviously, they're not taking into account human behavior and looking at all the people who have not woken up and who have not concluded the same line of thinking. If you look at The Law by Frederick Bastiat, he talks about it and makes a great point. And where we're at is much further down that road of tyranny than when he wrote that back in the 1850s. And people want to use government and use the law to benefit them and to exploit other classes of people. And that is a fact of reality. And no matter how much you disagree with that, as long as that system exists and is growing, there's going to be an increasing number of people who want to use it to their benefit. Luckily, our movement and our ideas are spreading and growing, and I think it's incredibly important that that continues to take place. And that is largely why I'm involved. And again, this is something that, for some reason, some of these anarcho-capitalists, they seem to disagree that this is an effective method. One of the things I would challenge is, where was their voice before Ron Paul's message caught fire. And I might add that it took nearly 30 years for his message to catch fire. What would have happened if Ron Paul had given up after talking into the wind for 20 years? This movement wouldn't be here. We wouldn't, many of us would not have gotten educated and gotten involved. I know there are some people who were, but they were lone voices out there. Now there's a huge movement, and I would say it's largely because of him and people who helped get his voice heard, like Alex Jones and other radio talk show hosts. But it's incredibly important to recognize that he ran for Congress not to become a congressman and make a big difference. He ran to educate people about economics. Not the most appealing topic to most people and the most interesting thing. And he spent his entire career as a political philosopher and an educator rather than a politician. And I think that people like Stefan Molyneux, who brags about having so many downloads and so many people looking at him, I don't know this, but I question, when did those downloads take place? My guess is that a great number of those downloads took place after the Ron Paul movement. That's how I heard of him, and I'm sure there's a great deal of people that have learned a lot and expanded in the liberty movement because of him. And I think that we need to take the opportunity to get those platforms to be able to educate more people. There's a couple of quotes I wanted to – go ahead.
Go ahead. Put your quotes out there, and then I'll throw one back at you.
Sure. And this is regards to the state. I'm going to actually slightly defend the state, even though I ideologically do not want a state. I want to make that clear. But I am a realist and believe that it is necessary until there is incredible psychological and social fundamental changes in our society, and it's not foreseeable. So I'm a realist, I believe, in that regard. So where someone is able to be forcibly impose direct consequences on others, those others cannot be said to be free. The reason for a legal system, whether monopolistic or competitive, is to enable those on whom direct consequences have been imposed to rectify the injustice. Sheldon Richman. And I think that there are other points you could argue where there is a logical, rational understanding of why you would want to come together to help protect each other and protect their rights, which is kind of the idea of our constitutional republic. And I understand that Stefan does not support the Constitution. He's not radically opposed to it. One of the points he makes is if we were somehow to return back to that minus the slavery and, with women's rights and people being treated equally. So not going back completely, but going back to a very limited government is what he's saying, that ultimately it would just grow and get very large again. So he's not completely throwing out the Constitution, but actually he does. But that, I think, is his reasoning, because he believes it will just expand and grow, which goes back to the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. We don't live in utopia. We're never going to get to the point where everyone is just going to be free and nobody ever has to do anything again, and no one's ever going to try to hurt or exploit other people, and that we're going to have some magical system of individuals just doing good things and rectifying their problems in a mature way. Maybe that will happen. I shouldn't say never, but that's not foreseeable or realistic to believe that that's going to take place. So I think that that's ridiculous.
Let me throw something at you here, okay?
Sure.
The whole quote about, you can choose to ignore politics, but that doesn't mean that politics is going to ignore you. I used to go spout that off to people all the time. But one of my quotes that I think I'll place a little bit higher on the pedestal of thought-provoking quotes from the past, Albert Einstein: you cannot solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it. You must see the world anew. What I'm saying, Matthew, is that we have, our society's been turned into, just huge, it's just collectiveness. The collectiveness, the debt, and we're trying to change it with more collectiveness. Do you think that we can change a collectivist problem with a collectivist solution? Because that's kind of how I feel it's turned into as far as getting involved politically. You know what I mean?
Again, I'd refer back to the law, and I do believe that there has to be a shift in consciousness and thought and what is the purpose of law, because I believe that the law has been perverted and it is being used for legal plunder, and it is not being used to protect individuals' rights. So I think that there has to be a change in consciousness. I don't think that we can change it with the same line of consciousness. That's what this is. That's what this is all about, is educating people, getting people to think differently. and to want to treat people equally. And there's one more here that I find it interesting, especially at this source. But when you're talking to folks who believe that, like us, who want freedom, who want to be freer, who want to have less government intervention in our lives, it's by Eleanor Roosevelt, and it is, freedom makes a huge requirement of every human being. With freedom comes responsibility. For the person who is unwilling to grow up, the person who does not want to carry his own weight, this is a frightening prospect. And I mean, I would follow that with, at least in our current society, I don't think most people want to be free in the same capacity as a lot of the folks in the liberty movement want to be. I don't think they desire that level of freedom. And I think through whatever means it has come about, a lot of people put more stock into security than they do freedom, and that is the philosophical long battle that we have that will go on forever, and that we have to continue to talk about because that is the struggle we're in, is freedom versus security.
That's right. And Matthew, thank you so much, folks. We got to take a quick break. It's the top of the hour, 6-minute break. Go get your coffee. We're going to be right back. Sound of Freedom, Orion Talk Radio. Matthew Hayward, Ryan Brooks. We'll be right back. Don't go away.